Now I'm pleased to introduce our commencement speaker, Christine Ha. Christine is the first ever blind contestant and season 3 winner of the competitive amateur cooking television show MasterChef with Gordon Ramsay. In doing so, she defeated more than 30,000 home cooks across the country to secure the MasterChef title and a cookbook deal. Christine holds a Master of Fine Arts from the Creative Writing program at the University of Houston, where she served as fiction editor for Gulf Coast Literary Journal, and a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Texas at Austin. She is currently working on her memoir and second cookbook. Recipes from My Home Kitchen, Asian and American Comfort Food, Christine's first cookbook, was a New York Times bestseller. Very nice. That's pretty impressive. She has been featured on NPR, the BBC, and CNN International, and travels around the globe to give keynote addresses and TEDx talks. Christine has also served as a culinary envoy overseas for the American Embassy as part of cultural diplomacy programs in Jordan, Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Croatia. She was a co-host on the Canadian cooking show Four Senses and a judge on MasterChef Vietnam. In 2014, Christine received the Helen Keller Personal Achievement Award from the American Foundation for the Blind, a recognition formerly bestowed upon Ray Charles, Patty Duke, and Stevie Wonder, among others. Christine's first restaurant in Houston, The Blind Goat, was named a semifinalist for the 2019 Best New Restaurant in America by the James Beard Foundation. Her second restaurant, Sin Chow, opened in September 2020. Please welcome Christine Ha. And that lip is just right below the top of the lectern.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. First, I want to thank the President, the Provost, Board of Trustees, and university leaders for inviting me here today to give my first commencement speech. Part of me is pretty glad that I can't see how many people are out there, so I'm a little less scared. To all of the family, friends, faculty, staff, program mentors, and WGU community, welcome. And last but not least, to the graduates, congratulations, you did it. Some of you may know me as the blind cook that won MasterChef Season 3 on Fox a decade ago with Gordon Ramsay. And for those of you who don't know who I am, well, I'm the blind cook that won the MasterChef Season 3 with Gordon Ramsay in 2012. It's been 10 years. I'm here to tell you my story about how I got from point A to point B, because as many of us know, our life trajectory is never one straight line. My story began before I was even born. My parents were refugees from Vietnam who came here in 1975, right as the Vietnam War was ending. They came over here with nothing but the clothes on their back. I was born some years later in Long Beach, California. So if any of you watched the Super Bowl last week, you know LBC was repping hard. I grew up mostly in Houston, and from a very young age, my parents tried to instill in me the importance of education. I remember one of the first pieces of furniture that my parents bought me when I was about 4 years old was a little plastic green desk so I could sit on the floor and draw and write and do math problems, you know, the typical things a kid would do in their spare time. But I knew that education was important. My parents told me that I was expected to be a straight A student. And when I came home and showed my mom my report card of straight A's, she said, "Wait, why aren't they A pluses?" I told my parents that my friends would get paid about $1 or $2 for every A they brought home. So I asked where my money was, and they said, "Well, for every non-A you get, you can get a whooping." So as you know, I knew from a very young age that education was important to my parents. Fast forward many years later, I went off to college to get a business degree at UT Austin. And although I was a fairly good student, I didn't know how to cook a thing in the kitchen. So being Asian American, I was the bane of most Asian parents because I didn't even know how to steam rice in a rice cooker, so very embarrassing. But eventually I decided to learn how to cook. I moved out of the dorms after my first year in college and into a small apartment on the west side of campus, and we had a small kitchen. And I knew I had to learn to cook because I could no longer rely on the dorm food. I couldn't afford to eat out all the time. And unfortunately, my mom passed away when I was 13 and never taught me how to cook and never left any recipes behind. And I realized at this time in my life when I was a young adult that I really missed her cooking. Growing up, I ate a lot of Vietnamese food. That's the food that she grew up eating, and she decided to cook in her house. So it was a lot of fish sauce, braised pork belly, some oxtail, aromatic noodle soups, stuff that I was actually embarrassed about bringing to school. And I would always be the student trying to trade my lunch for my classmates' bologna and cheese sandwich or PBJ. Of course, no one wanted my stinky fish sauce lunch, so I had to eat that. But growing up as an adult, I look back and I really miss the foods that my mom cooked. So I bought a couple cookbooks, some pots and pans, and read these recipes and taught myself how to cook in my apartment. There were a lot of terrible dishes I cooked back in the day, but I kept at it and persisted, and eventually I was able to cook something that my friends and my roommates actually enjoyed. It was a Vietnamese dish. It's a ginger braised chicken, and I actually chose that recipe because after many failed attempts, it was the first recipe I found in the cookbook that had the shortest list of ingredients and the least amount of steps. Fortunately, my roommates and my friends ate it all up. There were no leftovers, nothing went into the trash, and I remember looking around the table at that time in college and seeing their happy smiles and satiated bellies, and it made me very happy to realize that I was able to make something with my own two hands and serve other people and make them happy with my creation. It was at this time, coincidentally, that I started losing my vision. It began with blurriness in one eye, and I went to the doctor and they told me that it was actually something neurological. I was misdiagnosed initially with multiple sclerosis, and it was 4 years before they correctly diagnosed me with something called neuromyelitis optica, or NMO. It's an autoimmune condition that primarily affects the neurological system, so it affected my optic nerves. They were inflamed a lot, and over time they atrophied, and that's how I lost my vision. NMO also affects the spinal cord. I remember thinking back to a long time ago, one of my worst attacks. Over a period of 4 days, I was completely paralyzed from the neck down. It was a very hard time in my life. I had to leave my job in the corporate world. I spent a long time on the road to recovery, doing a lot of physical therapy, a lot of occupational therapy. But I remember not being able to move, not being able to hold a glass of water and drink it myself, not able to brush my teeth, not able to sit up, not able to see. Besides visits from family and friends, the only thing that really helped me through that time was listening to audiobooks. Now, growing up, I was an avid reader. I had a huge imagination. I was an only child, and so I had a lot of imaginary friends. I loved getting lost in the world of literature. And it was during this time that reading books, again, helped me escape my reality. So when I recovered from my spinal cord inflammation, although I did not gain my vision back, I decided to learn to read Braille, learn orientation mobility, how to get around with a white cane. I learned to navigate the public transportation system in Houston, which was not easy. And I decided to go back to school to get my master's in creative writing. In my last year, instead of defending my thesis, I decided to, as if it wasn't hard enough to graduate, go audition for MasterChef and have Gordon Ramsay yell at me on national television. For me, I didn't go thinking I would win. I really went for the experience because I thought I would learn something about cooking. Maybe I would come back with some creative juices to write a story about it. I didn't expect to win that season, but I did. And then since then, I've been able to write a cookbook. I was super excited when my cousin texted me and said it was on the New York Times bestseller list, one notch above Gwyneth Paltrow's cookbook. I've been able to travel overseas to help with women's empowerment movement, entrepreneurship, help advocate for people with disabilities and vision impairment. I've also opened 2 restaurants, one of which during was the pandemic, which was definitely rough. But I have 2 restaurants now in Houston. So looking back at my story, at first look, you may not think that our stories are at all similar or our paths are similar, but I'm here to tell you otherwise. If you break it down, our stories are very much the same. We've all had to deal with challenges in life, whether they be physical, like the diagnosis of a chronic illness or a disability. They could be mental challenges, like depression or a learning disorder, or they could be a relational challenge, like failed relationships or the loss of a loved one. We've all had to deal with some sort of challenge. Obviously, in these last 2 years, we all know that we've had to adapt and overcome. All of us are dealt a hand in life. Some are better than others, some are worse, but it's really not what hand you're dealt that matters, it's how you play that game that really counts. So I'm here to tell you that no matter what hand you're dealt with, you're able to play that hand, and you're here, sitting here today, and you've accomplished quite a bit, so congratulations on that. My parents obviously knew that education was important, but looking back, I've realized that life experience is really what got me to where I am today. And now all of you have both experience and an education under your belts. So please take those things, go out there and conquer the world, because ambition never rests. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Let's give Christine one more round of applause. And if you ever thought going back to school was hard, you could always sign up for a cooking contest to be yelled at by Gordon Ramsay. So I'm not sure Gordon would make a very good program mentor for us. He's like, his version of encouragement may be very different than ours. So, Christine, thank you for sharing us about what you've experienced and how through them all you've persevered. It's truly inspiring.